So my first question is, obtaining diversity in leadership, staff, and teacher force is very important right now for the Worcester Public Schools. What are some of your strategies to help guide that the school committee to tackle these issues or goals?
I think, I met earlier in the year with the assistant superintendent in Boston. They led the community through a whole process, through multiple meetings with creative engagement tools to identify a series of clear goals and objectives, not just staff and teacher diversity, but an equity lens on the whole schooling, culture, with a lens on culturally and linguistically sustaining practices, and how do we move towards that. That community engagement process is really critical to the overarching plan being successful. And so I do think we have to start at the ground level and hear from folks what is and isn't working. I think that there are some great models in the city. It's not all bad news.
So what do you think is the biggest disconnect between an amazing school like your daughter attends and other schools that are kind of been failing for many years and continue to kind of not show any progress?
So we have to be asking the right questions to get the right information. And I think that kind of process to look across the city and say, okay, what are the things we really care about as school communities for our kids to have? And how are we going to keep track of whether or not those things are happening?
So that kind of segues to another questions that I have. Do you think we have a racism problem in our Worcester Public School?
But it's a systemic issue. And I think that it would be foolish to say that that issue doesn't exist here just as it exists everywhere else. I think the bigger question is, do we have the right data to figure out where the racial disparities that are happening are so that we can solve them?
And do you think we have that data?
I don't know. It's not always
from what you've seen publicly, because you have not been.
No, we don't, because you need follow-up questions, right? Saying, listen, I know there's an issue here and I don't know what it is how we get to the answer. We have to first be willing to recognize that there are more questions that need to be asked. It's about looking at the data and seeing how we correct the racial disparity that's happening.
So, in your opinion, what's one of the ways that the Worcester Public School can move from, because you talk a lot about culture and recognizing problems and actually digging in and finding common ground to challenge. What do you think are going to help us kind of recognize those problems?
When I speak with some of the teachers in the community, some of them absolutely recognize the issues. I think when we see some of the decisions that are being made, I question whether or not that's always getting through. And I think one of the really important ways to make sure that it does is to have really authentic channels of communication. And so right now I don't see opportunities for folks to really be part from the ground up of developing the kind of school communities that they want to be part of. And so one of the things that I plan to do as a school committee member, have monthly community forums where people can sit together at tables and talk about the issues that they're having and propose solutions that cut across those different issues. And then as a school committee member, I can take those solutions to the table and propose agenda items and work with the rest of the committee to push those ideas from the community forward.
Besides having those specials, those places to kind of have both of them the input from both of them, what other ideas do you have for kind of alleviating that?
I think in addition to having really authentic community spaces and also office hours, the other I think is just really surveying the community about how they want to be communicated to. So we can't just send information out on our terms as a district. We need to be willing to hear from folks how they want to be communicated with.
If elected, what are your 3 top priorities overall during your tenure?
So the community engagement is one of my very first top priorities. I think really looking at our curriculum and the spaces that we're offering our young people and the supports, and making sure that we have a really authentic 21st century approach to our schools that is collaborative, that is building not just the knowledge that young people need, but the skills that they need. And then the third is really building strong connections between our school and city. If we're not communicating with each other, but we're both serving the same people, then there's going to continue to be gaps in what people are getting.
What is the one thing you're most looking forward to if elected?
I'm looking forward to what I've already been doing, which is talking to the people that are the most impacted by our schools, the parents, teachers, and students that are engaged in the school communities every day. I'm excited to dig into the big challenges that we have and bring, some solutions that I'm sure other people have already figured out that we can bring to the table, but also to just get into the community and hear from folks about what they want to see happen.
Yeah, I think they will love that. So my last question is, what is one thing that you don't think you've been asked, or at least, like in a public space, that you would like voters to know and the community of Worcester to know? Right?
I haven't been asked a lot about my experience as a student in the Worcester Public Schools. One of the things I've heard universally on the doors is how much everybody hates the high-stakes standardized testing. And I took that test, and those of us that were in high school when that first was introduced organized against the test. And I think a lot of us said then what we know now. I think that we need to listen to the people that are most impacted by the experiences in our classrooms, in our hallways, in our school communities, if we're going to identify the right solutions.